It is the year 1978. A thin man in a faded gray suit steps into a dying factory on the outskirts of Guangdong. The building is silent. The machines rusted. Workers sit half asleep, staring at their hands, at their future. His name is Deng Xiaoping. Just 2 years earlier, China had been starving. The Cultural Revolution had shattered universities, dismantled farms, and torn apart millions of families. But Deng carried a different idea, one that would defy history itself. He would rebuild China, not with ideology, but with prosperity. To get rich is glorious. It was the most dangerous sentence ever spoken in communist China, and the most transformative. Because within a single generation, that sentence would turn a broken nation into the world's newest superpower. But today, that miracle has become a warning, a threat, a challenge to the global order. Because the world no longer sees China's rise as a miracle, it sees it as a menace. This is the real reason the world fears China's rise. When Deng Xiaoping opened China's doors in 1978, almost no one believed it would work. China was poorer than sub-Saharan Africa. Its GDP per person barely reached $200. Its cities were quiet, its factories empty. But Deng's reforms unleashed something no ideology could suppress: ambition. Foreign investors poured into new special economic zones. Farmers could finally sell their own harvests. Small workshops turned into supply chains. Supply chains turned into industries. By 1990, Shenzhen, once a sleepy fishing village, had become a booming metropolis. By 2000, China was the manufacturing center of the world. By 2010, it was the second largest economy on Earth. No empire, no civilization, not even America in the 20th century had risen so far, so fast. But behind the applause, behind the skyscrapers, behind the factory floors running day and night, lay something far more important. China wasn't just rising, it was rewriting the rules of power. In the West, prosperity and freedom were supposed to move together. More wealth meant more democracy. More capitalism meant more liberty. China broke that equation. It grew rich without democracy. It modernized without westernization. Under Deng's successors, Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, and later Xi Jinping, this model evolved into something new. A hybrid system, part capitalist engine, part Leninist command. Economic openness, political control, equals unstoppable state power. The Communist Party opened the markets, but never the government. It allowed capital to flow, but only within its grip. Alibaba, Tencent, Huawei, all powerful, all innovative, all ultimately subordinate to one rule: the party comes first. To Western observers, this wasn't just competition, it was evolution. A new kind of state corporate machine that could redirect entire industries overnight. And for Washington, that was the moment alarm bells began to ring. By the 2000s, China had become the factory of the planet. 28% of everything manufactured, from plastic toys to high-speed trains, came from its assembly lines. A single iPhone passed through more than 700 Chinese suppliers. And Western corporations, hungry for profit, outsourced everything: production, logistics, leverage. Without realizing it, they were building the foundations of a future rival. Every container ship leaving a Chinese port didn't just carry products, it carried dependence. By 2008, as Wall Street collapsed, China held over $3 trillion in foreign reserves, much of it in American debt. The roles had reversed. The world's richest nation now owed the world's factory. This was the turning point. China realized it didn't need to fire a shot to challenge the West. It only needed to control the supply chains. In 2013, Xi Jinping unveiled a vision that would reshape global geopolitics. The Belt and Road Initiative, a $1 trillion web of ports, railways, highways, and power grids stretching across Asia, Africa, and Europe. To China, it was economics. To the rest of the world, it looked like empire. Ports in Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and Greece, financed, built, and sometimes seized by Beijing, placed strategic infrastructure under Chinese influence when debts couldn't be repaid. Critics called it debt trap diplomacy. China called it strategy. Old empires conquered land. China conquered infrastructure. A road in Kenya, a port in Sri Lanka, a power grid in Laos. All lines leading back to one center, Beijing. For nations desperate for investment, China became the banker of last resort. And soon their roads, their ports, even their data began flowing east. America had built globalization. China was now owning it. By the late 2010s, the world finally woke up. China was no longer just making cheap goods. It was making the future. Huawei dominated 5G. BYD and CATL led electric vehicles and batteries. DJI owned 80% of the global drone market. And deep inside the devices Western consumers use every day were components assembled in China. The Western dream of free trade had become a strategic nightmare, because now Beijing didn't just shape the world's present, it was shaping its future. Artificial intelligence, quantum computing, ubiquitous surveillance. These were no longer American monopolies. They were Chinese ambitions. And unlike Silicon Valley, China's tech giants do not separate innovation from state power. Every algorithm, every satellite, every byte of data ultimately belongs to the state. In China, technology is not a tool of freedom. It is an instrument of control. To Western democracies, this was unthinkable. To China, it was inevitable. So what does the world truly fear about China's rise? It isn't just the economics. It isn't just the military. It's the alternative. For the first time in the modern era, a superpower is proving that prosperity does not require democracy, only order. And that terrifies the West. Because if China succeeds, the moral foundation of the Western world, the belief that freedom and prosperity must go hand in hand, begins to crack. Across Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, leaders are watching and learning. Ethiopia uses Chinese-style digital surveillance. Saudi Arabia adopts Chinese AI policing. Even Europe buys Chinese 5G networks. The world isn't just trading with China. It's copying China. The fear isn't that China will invade. The fear is that China will convince. That its model, centralized, efficient, technocratic will become the new default operating system of the 21st century. And, in many ways, it already has. China's rise isn't only physical, it's psychological. It's in the phones we use, the clothes we wear, the loans that build the world's infrastructure. Every dollar spent on cheap goods fuels a system the West claims to fear, yet cannot live without. China no longer seeks the West's approval. It is building a parallel world, one where Beijing, not Washington, writes the rules. Digital yuan instead of dollars, Chinese satellites instead of GPS, TikTok instead of Hollywood. Soft power through culture, hard power through commerce. A silent empire rising without invasion, only integration. And perhaps the most unsettling truth? China's dream is not to replace the American empire. It's to outlast it. Democracies change every 4 years. The party plans in centuries. In 1978, Deng Xiaoping said, "It doesn't matter if a cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice." The world laughed. But 40 years later, that cat has captured the world's attention and much of its economy. China's rise is not the story of a nation growing rich. It is the story of a civilization returning to power. A civilization that never forgot what it lost. The West fears China because it cannot understand it. China fears the West because it remembers it. This is the paradox of our century. One side built the global order, the other mastered it. And now, both are trapped in a race neither can afford to win or lose. This is the real reason the world fears China's rise.